Give it up for Dan Gailey. Woo!
Let me hear you say, oh yeah. No, I'm just kidding. It's like, it's way too early. Yeah, my talk is actually going to be about AI economies, and I'm the CEO of Synapse.ai. We basically are building AI plus blockchain applications in a very decentralized way. We're thinking about decentralized AI. How do we open it up to everyone to participate and build kind of a global brain? And with that, we start thinking about the implications of these things. But before we get into that, I'd like to take us back a little bit to show us how we got here. So, what we're really good at, what humans are really good at, are basically identifying and describing systems, building tools to leverage those systems, and then optimizing the output of those systems with those tools. And I hand drew all of these so they wouldn't be so boring. And also to prove to my mom that I'm still a good artist. No jokes there, okay. Humans, because they can identify and describe systems, they realize that this whole thing is a system that they can then create tools around. So it's kind of a meta system. We identify that we are a system, and then we decide to model it. Using calculations, using computer vision, using feature classification, feature selection and classification, using language, NLP, learning, and one-day reasoning. And then we build tools around that. We build computers, robots, bots, and eventually AI and ML. So where we're at now is here. We're at this really cool inflection point where we essentially built these machines to help us. And in the past, we built machines that helped humans. But the inflection point that we're at is that we're going to start helping machines. So the directive shift goes from humans to machines, now to machines to humans. We'll become more reliant on our algorithms in our daily lives. A good example of this is ride sharing. So previously in the past, we've had navigation, driving coordination done by humans, and now machines are obviously taking over. Maps, Google Maps, Waze are taking over the map section. Self-driving cars have taken over the driving, and coordination has been taken over by those algorithms. So we start to build a worldview around these things, where if we're building autonomous agents that participate to coordinate resources, every resource is offered by a service through some interface, and the directive to allocate resources according, the world is essentially full of directives to allocate resources according to context and demand. And what we're doing is we're eventually giving more agency to these things. So right now in the bots world, we kind of have these, I would say, voice interfaces that are essentially query-based bots. They're not really thinking, and they're not really intelligent as of yet. They're very verticalized. They live within a very particular ecosystem like Google or Amazon, and they aren't able to coordinate tasks among different agents, different bots. You can't go from your Alexa to your Google Home to your future Uber or Tesla bot that will live in your car. And it's a multi-agent system-ish, right? In that you need developers to build in APIs, and they can't contract one another just yet. So what is now, right? The things that we'll be talking about next are essentially things that we're building into this ecosystem now to kind of open it up. Crypto and blockchain. It would be silly for me not to get up on stage and talk about the future without mentioning this, right? this is what I like to call the 3Ds. It allows for decentralization, democratized access, and distributed compute and storage, distributed resources. What the blockchain unlocks for us within this context of like a multi-agent system and getting these things out of these siloed venues and out and talking to one another and transacting and contracting one another is data lineage. That is essentially, if you're able to write things in a very temporal fashion, then you can start to observe patterns in how things interact, when things transact, and eventually be able to make optimizations through the tasks of particular directives. Also, access control. We can create smart contracts that give access almost through networks of trust to our resources, right? Such as our data, such as our genetic data, such as maybe even our autonomous vehicle that wants to contract itself out as an Uber. We can create a global event network. So what that means is when something happens on the network, because all the other nodes on that network, all the other agents and bots and humans that are listening, will get notified under a particular domain or context. So that creates a kind of a cascading of these events that happen through these contracts. It's kind of interesting, and you'll have this like ripple effect through whole economies one day. Contract fulfillment is another thing. So if an autonomous vehicle wants to access our personal transaction or personal write history, you can do that via this event network. They can have access to something like our genetic data. Like I just had my whole genome sequenced, and it was really interesting. And I think being able to put that online so that other people can build more models and conduct more research to build those models around my genetic data is something that's going to be really important part of kind of a future of getting to know ourselves through these insights. We can also create ontologies where you're basically creating a schema of programmatic access to look up resources, so that you don't necessarily need to know outright, but you can actually query some schema to participate in some new resource. And all of this is programmatic too, which is cool, which opens up kind of the ability for autonomous agents and bots and programs to contract and transact with one another without our intervention. And that starts laying the foundation of what becomes AI economies. Crypto is essentially global, it's a global currency, right? It's programmatic money, it's machine money. It's been described as machine money, which is really cool because when we're talking about giving agency to these bots, then we're talking about also perhaps giving them agency over their portion of their resources. So giving them a wallet makes sense. And a wallet to transact, and when you're thinking about agents that have the insight to transact their resources with other agents, you need something like crypto. Another cool aspect of where we're at now is we're starting to see this human-in-the-loop machine learning training, where people are essentially training machines to replace the people training machines. And it's fascinating because that starts to change the future of work. And it changes the future of work in ways where you have on-demand intelligence or an on-demand workforce that comes in and builds models, but not just builds models, makes them better over time. So you have people who are coming in and basically handling the edge cases. And one really cool example of this is last mile delivery robotics right now. If you've ever walked down the street to get from your house to your friend's house, especially in San Francisco, you'll realize that there's a ton of edge cases. And edge cases are things that you probably take for granted, right? You know, how do you observe when it's okay to walk? How do you maneuver past a vehicle? How do you maneuver down the broken sidewalk? All of these things are edge cases that can't readily be built in the models unless they've been encountered before. And if they haven't been encountered before, you need somebody to come in and train it, right? When it sees an obstacle like this, it can infer what to do from that training data. So what we're seeing now are autonomous robotics being built in with human-in-the-loop training, which means that when they encounter an obstacle, a human will come in and navigate that robot and train it. Another cool and interesting idea that helps kind of build out this network, right? Now we're talking about a very decentralized and distributed network, is federated learning. And if you're able to coordinate resources across this network in a very decentralized way, you're able to distribute things like storage and compute. You can have a bunch of machines contracting one another and participating in allocating these resources, right? Consuming these resources, and then transacting with one another, but in a way that goes to build models in a very communal fashion. Which means that when the models are trained, all the robots that are participating and observing those models and leveraging those models grow smart across the board. So what is the impact? So in industry, this is where we start talking about the more emergent aspects of this thing. And I know I've been talking about it in very abstract terms. And it's important to talk about it in abstract terms because so many things will change simultaneously when we're considering a very decentralized network where you have agents that are able to coordinate tasks, that are able to observe their coordination, that are able to then make better optimizations based on the decisions that we've had in that data lineage that we've talked about. What's really cool is like when you're able to observe these things, not just in vertical industries, but across all industries, you're able to make something more than local maxima, right? You're able to start optimizing on a global scale. And you have horizontal optimizations. So some of the things that we can start talking about is like network flow. And how do you optimize paths through entire industries as opposed to just one firm or one industry and their concerns. So with this network and the agency over resources, you have the ability to now transact with other autonomous agents, and you're able to optimize on the decisions that have been made before, and you're able to optimize on these loss functions, right? Whether that's cost or frustration of your end user. But you're able to create whole economies now. You're able to not just contract with one another, but create more emergent pools. And when you're able to transact autonomously, you can create a global autonomous logistics and supply chain, which is a pretty interesting idea. That means that you'll have whole logistics and supply chains that are coordinated without human intervention. Because these machines have access to programmatic money, they have agency over resources, and they can make decisions on our behalf. It's kind of the next thing. This is our AI economy. So for humans, what does that mean for humans? Industries are great, business is great, optimizing on profit is great. And the estimate on how much businesses will save or make in profit is somewhere in the realm of like $27 trillion. But I think that what will really happen is, I think we'll probably get rid of money at one point because these changes in these economies will be so massive. I don't think it'll make sense for humans to have to worry about that at some point. So, but taking a step back and talking about the insights that we can derive from a network that has access to resources that we provide, like our data and our participation, we can start building, again, back to the idea of data lineage, of provenance, we can start building predictive models of our habits. And what does that world start to look like when I can wake up and my day is kind of known, right? Through my calendar, through my history, through my interactions with people, to the way that historically I've interacted. It starts to look a lot like this very ambient, intelligent world where intelligence kind of lives through the devices around us and help to participate to build these models, these predictive models of how we live and how we can begin to participate in the day. So if I step out of my house and I know I have to go to a meeting and it's on my calendar, there will always be an Uber or Lyft waiting for me to take me to my destination without my intervention. Another cool idea is if you're able to allocate or I guess announce your genetic data, and we can start doing more research that maps genotype to phenotype to more emergent qualities like personality. I just found out that I'm 25% Native American, and then I also don't like people that chew with their mouths open. That was kind of in my report. So we're discovering these really cool things that give rise from our genome. And the more that we open up that data, the more that we can participate in this research, the more that we can understand more, not just about us on an individual level, but humanity as a whole. And then from there, we can actually create systems that help us live to our fullest potential. We'll have adaptive learning companions that are able to participate not just with us and understand us. We'll be born with these things from birth, and they'll help us kind of because they'll already know the capacity by which we're able to understand the world. So in the end, what this means is that we have more data. More data means more robust models, more representative models of who and what we are, and that means less biased data, less biased models in the end, because we're taking the resources away from very verticalized institutions and creating this horizontal kind of marketplace or exchange across this network. Now, because I said we can allocate any type of resource, we're eventually going to see humans become this more modular and on-demand workforce that is allocated based on the directives that these machines require in order to act as a stopgap for facilitating economic transactions. Like, what are we good at that machines aren't? And we'll start to see that close more and more. So if data is the new oil and AI is the new electricity, what's coming next is the new decentralized power grid. Like, how can we connect these things? How can we coordinate and help these agents transact in a heterogeneous kind of multi-agent system? So I'm Dan Gailey. You can find me on Twitter at @DPG. You can email me. I'm dan@synapse.ai. And thank you for listening to me talk.